So then why did you go on a right-wing podcast and say that the credit column is longer?
Because on the page it is.
We're dropping into the turning point of a debate on the British Empire. Watch this Oxford professor walk into a perfect trap that makes his entire argument melt down. If you enjoy watching hypocrisy get exposed, show your support by hitting the like and subscribe buttons, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. Now, let's watch this together, and then I'll give my 2 cents at the end.
We were involved in the slave trade. We conquered countries like multiple countries across the world, ran them almost as dictatorships. And the colonial leaders did speak in racist terms. I've only quoted 2. We could quote about 20 more. There is a lot of whataboutism in the book, Nigel. You seem to justify...
What's wrong with whataboutism?
What is wrong with whataboutism?
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you an example. You say, for example, the first Opium War, in which the British killed thousands of Chinese people. You say that war was wrong. You say in the book, you say it was wrong, it was unjust. But then you add straight away, in just a couple of lines later, that those Chinese deaths at the hands of the British in the 19th century, and I quote you, fade into insignificance when compared to the millions killed by Mao in China a century later. What has one got to do with the other? Mao killing Chinese people in the 20th century doesn't make it okay for the British to kill Chinese people in the 19th century. How is that a moral assessment?
The connection is this. The communist government in China uses the period when European powers and British powers were exploiting China to excite Chinese nationalism, and the communist government in Beijing completely ignores the fact that Mao presided over the deaths of Chinese on a much larger scale.
That's not a moral point, though. So why did you add the caveat? It pales into insignificance compared to Mao.
To make clear, Mehdi, that this was not extraordinary.
But that's not what morality is about. I mean, Nigel, it's not just China. I mean, throughout the book, I read this book, throughout the book, you kind of go halfway there, and then you can't help yourself. You say, the British Empire was bad, but it wasn't the Nazis. The first Opium War was bad, but Mao was worse. You say famines happened in India under the imperial watch, but the famines happened after independence too. You say the camps in Kenya were bad, but then you say, but the Soviet gulags were worse. You do that throughout the book. You can't bring yourself to just say, this was really bad. As a Briton, I'm saying this was bad.
Well,
why can't you do that? Can you do it tonight?
Page 276, you will find a whole list of the bad things over which the British Empire presided.
I'm chuckling because I had a feeling that you were going to say page 276. Because you wrote a postscript, and every time someone criticizes you, say, look at page 276. It's like your one page out of 400 pages where you list all the crimes, and it's your go-to move to say page 276.
Because page 276 summarizes what the previous 250 pages have said. It's not just the only place.
So can you do it tonight? Can you criticize something the British Empire did as evil without any qualification, caveat, if, but, what about?
Slavery. Disproportionate violence, sometimes the theft of land. The most destructive thing probably was the spread of disease, which was inadvertent.
You just did it! You just did it! You just did it in front of our eyes!
Well, tell me, the COVID epidemic killed 7 million people.
Okay.
It originated in China. Okay. Did the Chinese intend to kill 7 million people?
You've literally just made my point for me. Why are we talking about COVID? You couldn't bring yourself to just say it was really bad what the British Empire did.
The point has to do with the moral quality of an act depends on intention. There are lots of things we do that have bad effects. So
I agree with you on that. We agree.
So Europeans brought diseases to North America and Australia, as did Indonesian fishermen from Indonesia to northern Australia, which had devastating effects on native peoples. No one intended to do it. No one can be blamed for it.
I agree with you on intent. But when you carry out a massacre, like in Amritsar, that's intent. When you carry out torture in Kenya and you say we're going to do this quietly, that's intent.
As I admit in the book.
Okay, good. So we can condemn what happened in Kenya as an evil stain on British history. As part of the empire.
Well, it depends what you mean, but the
torture of people in the Mau.
The clubbing to death of 11 detainees by African warders at Hola Camp, yes, was very bad, and the authorities are responsible for that. Yep.
Great. I love it when we agree. In the conclusion of your book, Colonialism: A Moral Reckoning, you offer your readers a tally of the evils of British colonialism, as well as a, of course, credit column in the British Imperial Ledger. Basically,
why do you say of course?
I'll tell you why.
You seem to be sceptical.
I am, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
You summarize the pros and cons, the good and the evil, and then you say you're not keeping score. You say very explicitly, is that still the case, that you're not scoring them?
I don't say that.
You say, where's it gone? Let me just pull up the exact quote. You say, whatever the debit column of British colonialism, there's a credit column too, of which any fair ethical assessment must take into account the goods and evils that the empire caused intentionally or not of such different kinds that they cannot be measured against one another.
The different keeping score. So I keep score, but I say you can't weigh these up.
You can't say one's longer or better than the other.
Tell me how.
Is that your position?
Tell me how.
No, I'm asking the question.
Can't be done.
It can't be done. So then why did you go on a right-wing podcast and say that the credit column is longer?
Because on the page it is. Because on the page it is. Let me be clear. On the page there's a longer list of the good stuff. On the matter of whether you can weigh these things up, you can't do it.
So you were just talking about the physical pages that take it up. You weren't trying to imply on a right-wing podcast in 2023 that the credit column is longer for the British Empire.
Why is it relevant? The podcast was right-wing. What's it got to do with anything?
Oh, I think because you were talking to a host who was much more in agreement with you, and you were much more honest about what your actual view is, which is you think the British Empire did more good than evil.
No, I didn't say that. You have... I've made it perfectly clear. I don't think you can weigh up goods and evils in that fashion.
Okay.
So the point you were making is actually beside the point.
Even if we accept that the column is longer, and you're saying you don't think it's longer, you were talking about number of pages.
It was longer physically on the page.
Physically, you're talking physically, okay. But let me get to my question. How does that morally justify any of the evil side of the column?
It doesn't.
It doesn't, right?
Well, but name me... Okay, it doesn't. No, it doesn't justify it. But
Just devastating, because on the page it is. That is the sound of an academic whose credibility has just been vaporized in public. He had absolutely no answer. What we just witnessed wasn't just a simple gotcha moment, it was a strategic, three-act demolition. Let's quickly break down how Mehdi Hasan did it, because it was brilliant. First, at the very beginning of that clip, Mehdi put the professor's entire method on trial. He called out the constant, intellectually lazy whataboutism, the endless comparisons to Mao, the Soviets, the Nazis. He forced Biggar to defend his own logical fallacy, which set the stage for everything. Second, having exposed the pattern, Mehdi set a simple character trap. He asked him, "Can you condemn something the empire did without a single caveat?" And Biggar failed spectacularly. He couldn't stop himself from saying the spread of disease was inadvertent, before panicking and pivoting to COVID-19. He proved in real time that he was incapable of giving a straight answer. And that all led to the checkmate, the final trap. Mehdi knew that Biggar had told two different stories, the nuanced "you can't keep score" story for his book, and the much simpler "the good guys won" story for a friendly podcast. He presented Biggar with his own words, and the professor's entire argument collapsed under the weight of his own contradiction. This is what real accountability looks like. It's not about shouting, it's about preparation, research, and using your opponent's own hypocrisy as a weapon against them. Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button for more, and also don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching.